Welcome back to Animal Crossing New Horizons. I'm Dear Darling, and shall we see what's going on a lovely island of Fawnhallow today, where we'll be having, I guess, like a sort of like mini talkback. It's weird to say, it's a talkback for a D&D session which you, the audience member, probably didn't participate in, unless you're one of my friends, in which case you did participate in it. I do find it, like, I was thinking about it, I was having a shower, and I was thinking about it, I was like, it's kind of funny that I do like these D&D talkbacks in Animal Crossing, because, you know, normally you do a talkback with the audience or people consumed it, so I do a talkback with my friends who actually played, but, you know, they're not here right now. So good evening, everyone. Right now in Fawnhallow, it's 11 p.m. on Monday, July 29th, 2024. Because that's how it usually works. Like, you know, you see a play or something, or you participate in something, and then you be like, oh yeah, what would happen if that happened, or something. Well, I mean, normally the talkback's to do with like a drama. I mean, I think of it as like theatre productions, right? Like a theatre production which is not yet done to completion, but just sort of like happening, an amateur one or something. We'll probably have a sit-down episode today. But yeah, I don't see why the same can't be applied to like a D&D session as well. I mean, like Dimension 20 to it. But it only really makes sense to have a talk back, you know, with your players, because then your players are the ones who can like actually ask questions about it. They could be like, oh, what would have happened if like we did this, or like what happened about this, like what happened to this NPC, what happened to this, etc, etc. And maybe it would have made more sense, but whatever. I mean, this is the next best thing of them being able to find out stuff that happened, I suppose, for me, because anyway. Oh, Judy. This is like the second time we've had Judy, I think, as a campsite visitor. I don't know if that's true, by the way. It just feels true. But yeah, I mean, I'll talk a bit about my D&D session. You go and peel back the veil a little bit. So for those of you who are thinking of DMing yourself, you know, you can at least have a bit of my own perspective on it. Am I a great DM? No. Am I a good DM? Yeah. I'm not good enough, I would hope to think. Hard to tell sometimes. That you'd have to ask my players, I suppose. But yeah, like both campaigns now have had their final Act 1 bosses. This one we had Act 1 boss, you know, pretty late, so it's basically like a final thing before Act 1, and we're going to have like maybe one session of like half a session of epilogue, probably. There's not actually too much else. It might be surprising to say there's not too much else wrapping up. The only thing that needs to be wrapped up is like to them to clear their name. If they want to, they don't have to clear their name, and then figure out where they want to go from there. But it's a bit open-ended, certainly. What was I going to say about this? Sorry about that, a little bit of a pause as we continue onwards. I don't know what I was saying. Like the talk back. Oh yeah. Yeah. It's peel back. I guess I can't peel back literally everything, like over huge story arcing points, but I can talk about things which I brought up before. But basically, if you don't know, if you want to know what's going on, they're in this town, and the entire premise of like this Act 1 thing is I wanted to make the two campaigns feel different to each other. So the other campaign has a much more generic sort of heroic theme, like, oh, these are like you found your allies like very quickly, because it fits those characters. Those characters are sort of like, oh, I'm going to leap in and be a hero, a lot of them, apart from one of them. And a lot of them have, I think I said this before, a lot of them have extrinsic motivations, where motivations are to do with people around them, while this group is much more to do with people like themselves. So the other group is like, I want to go help out other people. So I want to be a shining beacon of inspiration. I want to be I want to go hunt monsters and beat them up. I want to, I guess this one's make as much money as possible. But to be fair, that character hasn't had, didn't have lore for a while, but now does. But these characters' motivations, one of them is like, I want to find myself and find inspiration. I want to survive, and I want to find out who I am. That sort of thing. So I thought something which would be centered more around, I guess, a bit of intrigue, but a bit more sort of like a, not murder mystery, but like a mystery sort of at the same time. It's not so straightforward who you can trust. It's like the first thing I did is like one of the people the group meets is helpful to them, but is also like a shady sort of businessman, and the other person is someone who looks helpful, but is in actuality was the Act 1 final boss. It was a character who was basically someone who worked on the council, and not another council, because they're not called the council, but the union, the people in charge of the government, essentially, the magistrate. And she basically helped them escape from like what seemed like demon attacks, which, you know, helped to build up that trust a little bit. But also, you know, I put in seeds of doubt, and then I like open up another connection with someone else, and someone else, a high wizard, and is like, is he evil? Is he not? I don't know. It's very much one which I feel like encompasses the sort of thing of like the world operates no matter what you do. The world operates without you. More than any of the other campaign, because it's like each of these people have their own individual motivations. Are they all necessarily good? No. Are they all necessarily bad? No. But it's sort of like a weird fine line, and as things go on, they get pushed further to one direction or another. So in this time, there was basically two people on in the Union who were corrupt, who went evil. They were basically taken over. They succumbed to demons' temptation. And there was a big theme of betrayal in this one, where this character talked a lot about betrayal and sort of like inducing this betrayal theme in others as well, and like talking about it and like commenting on it, which you might be like, oh, that's spoilers or whatever, and it's not really. Like I'd be really surprised if my players did not pick up on the fact, like I talked about betrayal like every other sentence in the battle. It's very difficult to get like monologues in a sensible location. I think, because I want to get these things across so you can get the impression of like, oh, this is their motivation, like, because then no one's going to sit down with a villain and be like, oh, what's going on, like you do with a player. So you only have the actions that they do and on influence on the world, and the things they find out about them to really give that opportunity. So there's like little monologue sort of things I drop in here and there between attacks. But yeah, but the whole thing is like, you don't know who you trust, to set it up as a thing where it's like there's a potential that they choose a wrong person to trust and it all like blows up in their face, which probably has less of an impact on them because they're not like that heroic paladin sort of archetype, that heroic person who's going to swoop in and save the day. They're very much more like, I'm not going to say they're selfish, but they have like their own self-motivations and interests, where it's just like, I need to sort out myself first before I help out the world, sort of thing. At least that's the vibe I get. So yeah, so there was a possibility that they trust the wrong person, then it blows up in their face. But they did their sleuthing. This group is also very much much more doubting, I suppose, of others. So I wanted to at least lean into that a little bit more. But there was these two people in the Union who were basically succumbed to demons' temptation, which basically they maybe that's too much of a law drop, but they embody a sin, kind of, and they sort of like gave into it. And that's the two fights. And then for this final day, or like leading up to Act 1, like they've got all the pieces together, and I'm just like, you have to put it together. Okay, I want to have like a push, because one thing with this group is that they've not really had like a ticking time bomb. The other campaign had like time pressure, because they had only a certain amount of days to do things. It's like a certain amount of days to the festival. The festival's when the bad thing's going to happen. We have to stop it before then. This group didn't have that as much. It was more just sort of like a wavy hand sort of thing, and that's where I sort of laid a bait for them, because they had to travel like a large distance to a city, and on the way back, and I was like, okay, I can make things interesting for them. I'll put something interesting in front of them, and of course they're going to go explore it. And it was actually a big temple. It was a big temple which they actually spent more time there than I expected. They spent like 3 nights there. They did like 3 long rests or something in there. So that's me putting the veil back. I didn't think you would spend that long there, but you did. But that's the point, because it was meant to delay time, because while delay time, they get back to town, and then it becomes a thing where it's like, oh no, things were happening while we're out of town. The person who we trusted, who we figured out, yeah, this person's probably good, has been captured, essentially. The other person, their assistant, has had to flee the city to run away to escape with her own life, and we are now wanted criminals in the city, but we still have something to solve. So now it's like, bam, here's a strict time limit of something that's going to happen. Your ally, the person that you're relying on, is going to be executed by morning. If you don't do something, you have to do something now. It's basically me being like, all right, you've had it not easy for too long, but you've had enough time. You've collected all you need to do. You found out all your information. Now put it to work. It's basically me sort of like calling out from game design. This is a final test to really show if you've been paying attention. So yeah, that's basically the sort of motivation I had for this act. Was like build up, like accrue a lot of information, lull them into a sort of falsish sense of security, when to be fair they're always on decently high alert, and then be like, boom, okay, now it matters. If you mess up, there are going to be serious consequences, because if this character dies, they can still find like a decent ending, like to the thing. They can still like clear their name, they can still clear everything up, they can still defeat the evil people, but they would have lost a really important NPC to them, a really powerful NPC potential ally to them. But now there's a hope of actually helping and saving them. He, yeah, what else was I going to say? And this and final encounter was basically me just being like, okay, this is the final test number 1. Do you know who actually are the villains, or can you find out? And yes, they did. Do you know, like, how are you going to basically... It's basically me being wanting to. I'm not sure if necessarily they thought exactly the same way, but it's like, okay, I've given you a strict time limit. This execution is going to happen on the morning of this. Everyone's going to be here. You can pretty much guess that sort of thing. This is the strictest time limit. This is a bare minimum I'm working with. This is going to be an absolutely lethal fight if you try and take that fight just like that. You'll be doing it in the middle of a crowd. There might be a lot of civilian casualties as well. And the bad guys probably would have got everything they wanted at that point. That is probably the hardest fight they can have. So it's just like, okay, but you know what's going on. You have half a day essentially to fix this, to change this to tilt this in your favor as much as possible. And that's basically what they did. That's my sort of game design perspective. This is the worst possible thing. You make it better. So what they did is they did a bit of investigation, making sure they doubly knew exactly what was going on. So they had to like find out where their NPC was even being held, find out like who the villains were. And they actually did a very clever thing of like springing on the fight what they could. Well, you might be like, is it clever or is it not clever? Because I guess part of it was my own hand of being like, let's try and take advantage of a situation. But they could have just like done all the investigating and like left and hid and then waited to try and spring a trap at the execution date. That's totally fine, but they didn't. They weren't very aggressively with it. They found some consequences and they managed to pull their way out. They've actually managed to do a thing where they split the fight in two. Because I said this before, there's two villains. One was a reskinned succubus, and the other was a reskinned knight, kind of. I gave a knight some smites because I was like, it's a final Aquan boss. It's got to be scary. And my players are stronger than average players. You got to bear that in mind. They have higher stats, so they have higher stats and I'm more, stuff like that. So the fight itself was meant to be on that stage. It was meant to be that succubus and knight, and it was meant to be pretty difficult. One of them, like beefy tank and frontline, just constantly dishing out consistent damage. The succubus basically completely shifting up the action economy by hopefully charming people onto her side and casting spells when she's run out of things to do. And it's going to be like, it's an incredibly dangerous fight because you had to do that. You had to try and keep the person alive at the same time, try and keep NPC casualties to a minimum, and at the same time they're wanted. So the people who are on the Union will probably be attacking them because they think they're the perpetrators. They have no reason to believe them. So it's just like, okay, you've got to sort these out. These are all these problems that you've got to sort out. And they did. They managed to fight them separately. They absolutely demolished the succubus boss by herself. Even though she charmed someone, she was basically permanently stunned because Monk's stun ability is too crazy. It's not crazy. It's more like it's too save or suck or whatever it's called. It's too like swingy, in my personal opinion. But that's fine. That's like how it is. Which led them to this final boss where they were having a fight, and to peel back the curtain even more, the initial fight looked like it was going to basically be in complete magical darkness. That wasn't what I intended the fight ever to be. The magical darkness was just basically meant to be an environment for an enemy, because they basically trying to prison break out their NPC. The NPC is stuck in this location where there's magical darkness around the entire thing, so people can't see. And there was a thing called an Ettering, which is kind of like a spider monster, which has web sense, I believe. Or if not, maybe I just homebrewed that. I gave it web sense, and it laid web down everywhere. So anytime one of the PCs walked in, not only are they slowed down and inconvenienced, the Ettering can attack them, they can't see the Ettering. That's the general concept of it, is to delay time as much as possible, make it as much noise as possible, because they have a ticking time. They have a ticking clock of when things have to happen by. So it's like, I'm going to waste time. I'm going to make them waste resources, or try to. I didn't intend to have a fight there, but, bad roll. Like, didn't check for traps. Alarm went off. Enemy escaped. Warned the person. So it's just like, okay, well, this is going to be the consequence of the action, and they're spending a lot of time here. The person's going to attack them here. And it's going to be it should have been an incredibly lethal fight, like probably more lethal than fighting them both at once, because they're fighting in magical darkness. They have disadvantage on everything, and this person has advantage on everything. Can you imagine fighting a balanced CR fight, but suddenly they have advantage on every attack, and you have disadvantage on every attack? That is crazy unbalanced. Turns a CR5 fight into like a CR8 fight or a CR10 fight or something. I don't know if that's quite how the numbers work out, but whatever. yeah, but then they came up with a clever idea of like because they had to do that and also save the NPC, but then they came up with a clever idea. I gave them a portable hole earlier, and because I was like, we're going to come up with some shenanigans of this and maybe this will work, because in my mind, and this peel back with cousin more, I was like, this could be helpful in like because I knew this guy was going to get captured anyway, could be good to sneak someone in, sneak someone out. Don't know how they're going to use it, we'll find out. But like we ended off last lesson, they started this session being like, can I do something before this all happens? And I was like, I could have been a stickler DM and been like, no, you can't. You should have done that before. But, you know, it was the end of a session. People are getting tired. I can't expect my players to always be on top of form. I will make mistakes. They will make mistakes. This seemed like a reasonable thing. So I was like, all right, roll an intelligence check. And we'll just say, if you get high enough, your character will think of this in the moment. And they did. And that made things significantly easier because it got rid of a magical darkness. Where they basically just held their NPC in the hole. Specifically, and they don't have to look after the NPC anymore. Fantastic. Still a very difficult fight. It could have been very lethal. I rolled actually very terribly with the boss. I think I got no crits, like no natural 20s, and I got 7 or 8 natural 1s as the boss. And I got so many 2s for like for the first, I think the first like 12 rolls in that fight, I didn't roll higher than a 3. On the boss, and I was like, this is incredibly like crazy. This is meant to be the final boss. I'm like, it doesn't feel lethal enough. But then it very much did feel lethal enough. When those smites started coming out, and it was like, okay, you take 28 damage. And they went, what? I had my own DMPC in their party as well, and I was like, okay, you know, it makes sense that like this DMPC is basically an artificer with some healing. But like, it makes sense that once that this boss would try and take down the healers once she knows that they can heal. She doesn't know who this new person is, so she wasn't all that bothered until she saw that, oh, you know, took down one of the player characters, and then the DMPC brought them back up. It makes sense for a boss to be like, all right, you're going to die now, because I can't have you constantly healing with characters. And there was a very clutch moment, you know, where it's always fun where you get to be like, okay, this is a moment where something pivotal is going to happen. They need to roll this, otherwise you are going to be in a terrible situation. And this one was like, I think it was a smite or something that I did on my own DMPC, and I was like, this PC is on, what was it, like 4 health. I'm going to roll a d6. If this is 4, 5 or 6, the DMPC goes down and both your healers are unconscious, which is, as you know, very devastating. And I rolled a 2, and it was just like a sigh of relief, as it was like, okay, yes, next time can come around, she can heal. And it got very, very dicey. It could have been very lethal. Like, this is the first time I actually downed, I think, the monk in the party, because his AC is like so incredibly high. It's like 19 or something. But I actually managed to down him because I got a lucky hit off and smited it with a branding smite. And yeah, the only sad thing is I didn't have more smites to sort of toss around, to be honest. But yeah, what was I going to say about all this? I don't remember what I was going to say about all this, but it was a very intense fight. It came very much down to the wire, you know. Just I genuinely think if I got a crit on almost any other characters, probably could have been a TPK. It would have been very, very close, I think. Or at least someone dying. And you might have been like, oh, you could have been more mean, you could have like attacked people while they're down. At the same time, I can, but I think it makes more sense. Like, that makes sense if it's like this boss's express purpose is like, I need to kill anyone. But this boss's purpose is, I need to win the fight. And some other purposes which won't be revealed yet. So it makes sense to attack and down the active combatants, starting with the healers and then move your way down to the other people. But they did some very clever things here and there. There was some like good telekinetic shoves here and there to sort of create space. There was a fantastic grapple and drag to bring them away from people, sacrificing his own like consciousness. I'm trying to, like, this is why you have a talkback, because if you have people here, you can have players be like, oh yeah, what would have happened if this happened, or like, what was up with that, and then I can answer it. But you know, now I had to basically think of a question and answer it myself. But so be it. There you go. Act 1 bosses both down. The other campaign's having sort of like a nice time having like an extended epilogue, and this campaign's gonna probably have a small epilogue and downtime in the next episode. I don't really know. We'll see how it goes. But for now, I'm going to round this episode off here because it's 11:24. So if you have been watching, thank you very much. It's been Animal Crossing New Horizons. I've been Dear Darling. Likes, comments, subscription, shares, greatly appreciated. Socials, Discord down below. Hope to see each other again, but for now, it's our farewell. So until next time, bye bye for now.